In the dead of night, a desperate mother stands in the pouring rain, her sick baby in her arms, facing an impossible choice no parent should ever have to make. With tears streaming down her face, she extends her child toward a black car where a mysterious millionaire waits, a man with secrets that will shatter everything she believes about herself. What would drive a mother to give away one of her twins? What dark family secrets connect these strangers in the night? As a hidden birthmark reveals shocking truths and a decades-old murder comes to light, Ellen's desperate act of sacrifice spirals into a web of identity, inheritance, and danger that threatens everyone she loves. Follow this heart-wrenching journey where love and blood collide, where the past refuses to stay buried, and where a mother must decide what she's willing to sacrifice to save her children. Follow our channel for more emotional true stories that will leave you speechless. Like and comment where you're watching from. The thin rain tapped against the zinc roof of the old trailer, creating a rhythm that matched Ellen's racing heartbeat. It was just past 3 a.m. and darkness enveloped everything except for the faint glow from a battery-powered nightlight, the only electricity they had left after the bills went unpaid. One baby was crying, his weak wails piercing the night, while the other lay in unnatural silence. Ellen's swollen fingers trembled as she held the cold bottle. The skin was cracked and raw from washing dishes at Maggie's diner, the job she'd lost 2 days ago when the owner caught her taking leftover food home. "I don't need thieves here," Maggie had said, not even looking Ellen in the eye as she handed over her final $43 in cash. She stared at the twins, both wrapped in threadbare blankets that had been donated by a church shelter. Liam, the smaller one, had bluish lips and labored breathing that made his tiny chest heave with effort. Noah slept peacefully, unaware of his brother's struggle or their mother's desperation. "Please," Ellen whispered to no one. "Please just let him make it through the night." The crumpled paper in her hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The hospital letterhead was still visible despite the tear stains. Congenital heart defect, urgent surgical intervention required, estimated cost. The numbers that followed might as well have been written in a foreign language. They represented an amount so far beyond her reach it seemed fictional. She'd tried everything. The emergency room had turned them away when they discovered she had no insurance and no permanent address. The social worker had given her pamphlets about government programs that would take weeks to process. Weeks Liam didn't have. Ellen had even called her parents, breaking 3 years of silence only to hear her father say, "You made your choices, Ellen," before hanging up. A car passed on the highway beside the trailer park, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. Ellen looked at the rain-streaked window and something inside her shifted. A terrible clarity washed over her as she made a decision she'd never imagined possible. With trembling hands, she put on her only dry shirt and took Liam's favorite blue blanket, the one without holes, from the drawer. She wrapped him carefully, making sure to cover his tiny ears against the rain. For a moment she just held him, memorizing the weight of him in her arms, the soft curve of his cheek, the way his eyelashes fluttered when he dozed. "I love you," she whispered, her tears falling onto the blanket. "I love you more than anything. That's why I have to do this." Ellen slipped her feet into her worn sneakers and stepped out into the rain. The cold droplets stung her face as she walked down the muddy path toward the highway. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, heavy, resistant, pulling her back. Yet she continued forward, driven by a mother's most primal instinct, to save her child, no matter the cost. She stood by the roadside for nearly 20 minutes, soaked to the skin before the black car appeared. It slowed as it approached her, its headlights dimmed. Ellen's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. The car stopped, and the window rolled down. Behind the wheel sat Jonathan Baird, his face half hidden in shadow. Everyone in town knew of him, the reclusive millionaire who lived in the mansion on the hill, who had lost his only son in a boating accident 5 years ago. The tragedy had turned him into a ghost of a man, someone who moved through the world without really being part of it. Ellen had seen him once before, at the hospital during one of Liam's early checkups. He had been donating money for the children's wing, surrounded by cameras and staff. Their eyes had met briefly across the lobby, and something in his gaze had stayed with her, a hollowness that matched the one growing inside her. Now, in the rain, with her baby clutched to her chest, she felt that same recognition pass between them. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. I can't keep them both alive." Jonathan stared at her, his eyes moving from her face to the bundle in her arms. He didn't speak. Ellen stepped closer, extending Liam toward the open window. He needs surgery. He needs medicine. He needs things I can't give him. The words tumbled out, each one tearing a piece of her heart away. I just need him to live. That's all I'm asking. Still, Jonathan didn't reach for the baby. The rain intensified, drumming on the car roof. Water streamed down Ellen's face, mixing with tears she could no longer distinguish. Please, she begged. You have everything. You can save him. When Jonathan finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, as if he rarely used it. But what he said wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It was a question that struck Ellen like a physical blow. Before I accept, I need you to tell me, do you know who fathered these boys? Ellen froze, the baby still extended in her trembling arms. The question hung between them, loaded with something she couldn't identify. Anger, pain, guilt. The rain seemed to pause, the world holding its breath. In that moment, looking into Jonathan's eyes, Ellen felt something shift in the universe, like pieces of a puzzle rearranging themselves into a pattern she couldn't yet see. I never wanted to know, she stammered, her voice barely audible above the rain. He was a mistake, a stranger. Jonathan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Without another word, he reached out and took Liam from her arms. The transfer was gentle, careful, as if passing something infinitely fragile. As he cradled the baby against his expensive suit, Ellen felt her legs threaten to give way. She had just handed over half of her heart to a man she barely knew. Jonathan placed Liam carefully in a car seat that Ellen hadn't noticed before, as if he had come prepared. But before he closed the door, he deliberately dropped something onto the wet ground between them. A photograph, old and worn at the edges. Ellen picked it up with numb fingers. Through the raindrops that splattered on the glossy surface, she could make out a woman who looked startlingly like herself. Same heart-shaped face, same wide eyes. The woman was smiling, her arm around a younger Jonathan Baird. She was pregnant, her other hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. When Ellen looked up in confusion, the car door was already closing. The last thing she saw was Jonathan's face, no longer empty but filled with a pain so raw it seemed to transcend time. The black car pulled away, taking her son into the night. Ellen stood in the rain, clutching the mysterious photograph, as a terrible question began to form in her mind. What had she just set in motion? Ellen stood frozen in the middle of the road, the rain soaking through her clothes until they clung to her skin like a second layer. The black car's taillights disappeared around the bend, taking with them a piece of her that she knew would never return. Her fingers trembled as they gripped the photograph, its edges already softening in the downpour. The woman in the photo smiled back at her, a ghost with familiar eyes, Ellen's own reflection. The same heart-shaped face, the same curve of the lips, the same slight dimple in the right cheek. But this woman was leaning against Jonathan Baird, her pregnant belly protruding beneath a floral sundress. They looked happy, connected, the kind of connection Ellen had spent her life searching for. "Who are you?" she whispered to the image, her voice lost in the night rain. A car horn blared, headlights suddenly blinding her. Ellen stumbled back, realizing she was still standing in the middle of the road. She clutched the photo to her chest and ran toward the trailer, splashing through puddles that soaked her already drenched sneakers. Inside, Noah was awake, his tiny fists punching at the air, face screwed up in a silent cry that turned audible the moment Ellen closed the door. The sound, one baby crying instead of two, hit her like a physical blow. She sank to the floor, back against the door, the reality of what she'd done crashing over her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, crawling toward the crib. "I'm so sorry, Noah. I had to give him a chance." Her words dissolved into sobs as she lifted her remaining son, cradling him against her wet clothes. The photograph lay on the floor where she'd dropped it. Even from a distance, the woman's eyes seemed to follow her, accusing, judging. Ellen laid Noah on the bed and changed her wet clothes with mechanical movements. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of a puzzle she hadn't known existed until tonight. Jonathan's question echoed in her head. "Do you know who fathered these boys?" The truth was, she did know, or at least, she thought she did, but it was a name she had trained herself never to say, never to think about. A chapter of her life she'd sealed shut and buried. The twins' father was a mistake, a regret, a shadow, nothing more. Yet Jonathan's question suggested he knew something she didn't. Ellen picked up the photograph again, studying it more carefully. The woman was younger than Ellen was now, perhaps 19 or 20. The image was dated in the corner, June 15, 1999, 26 years ago. Something cold and uneasy settled in Ellen's stomach. She was 25. Noah whimpered from the bed, drawing her attention away from the photo. She tucked it under her pillow and went to comfort him, but her thoughts remained scattered, grasping at connections just beyond her reach. Morning came with pale, watery light filtering through the thin curtains. Ellen hadn't slept. She'd spent the night alternating between tending to Noah and staring at the photograph, trying to understand what Jonathan Baird had been telling her without words. She made a bottle for Noah with the last of the formula, her movements slow and exhausted. Her breasts had dried up weeks ago, another failure to add to her growing list. As Noah drank, she gazed down at his face, so like Liam's that it physically hurt to look at him. "I'm going to get him back," she whispered, though she knew it was a lie. She had given Liam away. Legally? No. But who would believe her, a homeless, jobless single mother, over Jonathan Baird, the town's wealthiest resident and biggest charitable donor? A knock at the door startled her. Ellen froze, heart racing. Had Jonathan changed his mind? Was he bringing Liam back? But when she opened the door, it wasn't Jonathan who stood there. It was Officer Danvers from the local police department, his expression grave beneath his rain-splattered hat. "Ellen Reeves?" he asked, though they both knew who she was. In a town this small, everyone knew everyone else, especially those who lived on the margins. "Yes," she replied, clutching Noah tighter. "I need to ask you about your other child." "Liam, is it?" His eyes moved past her, scanning the trailer's interior. "We received a call from Mercy Hospital. They're expecting him for surgery this morning, but they're concerned about proper authorization." Ellen's knees weakened. "Surgery? Already?" She hadn't expected Jonathan to act so quickly. He's with his father," she lied, the words bitter on her tongue. "For the weekend." Officer Danvers's eyebrows rose. "His father? You've established paternity?" The question hit too close to Jonathan's from the night before. Ellen swallowed hard. "It's complicated. Well, the hospital needs proper consent forms for the procedure. They've been trying to reach you." He handed her a card. "Please contact Dr. Morris as soon as possible. The surgery is scheduled for noon." Ellen nodded numbly, taking the card. As Officer Danvers turned to leave, he paused. "Ellen, are you okay? Do you need help?" The concern in his voice nearly broke her. For a moment, she considered telling him everything. About Jonathan, the midnight exchange, the photograph. But what good would it do? It would only delay Liam's surgery, the surgery he desperately needed. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Thank you." When he was gone, Ellen sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the card in her hand. Mercy Hospital, the private facility on the other side of town. The place where even the parking cost more than Ellen made in a day. Jonathan hadn't taken Liam to the county hospital. He'd taken him to the best care money could buy. The question was, why? What was Liam to him? Ellen pulled the photograph from under her pillow, studying it again. The woman's smile, her hand on her belly, Jonathan's arm around her shoulders. A family, a connection. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. The timing, the resemblance. This woman, who looked so much like Ellen, pregnant in a photo from 26 years ago. Ellen's own unknown origins, abandoned at birth, raised in foster care. Could it be? Ellen's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp that might have awakened Noah. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture too terrible to contemplate. The name she never pronounced, the father of her twins. He was somehow connected to Jonathan Baird, and Ellen herself might be connected to the woman in the photograph. But how? And why had Jonathan taken Liam, only one of the twins? What did he know that she didn't? Ellen clutched the photo, her knuckles white. One thing was certain. She needed answers. And to get them, she would have to face the man who now held her son's life in his hands. And perhaps, the key to her own past. Morning light crept through the trailer's thin curtains, revealing dust particles dancing in the air. Ellen sat on the edge of her bed, Noah sleeping beside her, surrounded by a fortress of pillows to keep him from rolling off. She hadn't slept at all. The hospital card from Officer Danvers lay on the rickety table beside her. along with the mysterious photograph. Ellen picked up the card, running her thumb over the embossed Mercy Hospital logo. The clock on her phone showed 7:32 a.m. Liam's surgery was scheduled for noon, less than 5 hours away. Her heart constricted at the thought of her baby under anesthesia, tiny and vulnerable without her there to comfort him. Would Jonathan stay with him? Would anyone hold his hand? She pushed herself up, careful not to disturb Noah. Her entire body ached with exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. She needed milk for Noah, and she needed answers. Mrs. Patterson from 2 trailers down had agreed to watch Noah for a few hours. Ellen dressed quickly, pulling on her least stained jeans and a faded blue sweater, then gathered Noah's things, the few diapers she had left, a bottle, his favorite stuffed rabbit missing one ear. "I'll be back soon, my little lion," she whispered, kissing his forehead. He stirred but didn't wake, his perfect little face peaceful in sleep. How different from Liam's strained breathing and bluish tinge. The contrast had been growing more apparent each day, a visible reminder of what was at stake. The walk to Mrs. Patterson's was brief but exhausting. Ellen's legs felt like lead, her mind foggy from lack of sleep. Mrs. Patterson, a gray-haired widow with kind eyes and an oxygen tank that followed her everywhere, didn't ask questions when Ellen dropped off Noah. She merely nodded and said, "Take all the time you need, dear. This little one and I will be just fine." Ellen's first stop was Waverly's Mini Mart, the cheapest place in town for groceries, though cheap was relative when you had less than $20 to your name. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and Mr. Waverly looked up from his register, his usual scowl softening slightly when he saw her. "Ellen," he acknowledged with a nod. "Just got fresh milk in this morning." She managed a weak smile, grateful for the small kindness. "Mr." Waverly was one of the few people in town who didn't look at her with pity or disgust. Perhaps because he knew what it was like to struggle. His own son had been in and out of rehab for years. As Ellen reached for the smallest carton of milk, a voice behind her made her freeze. "Ellen Reeves, is that you?" She turned to find Dr. Harmon, the pediatrician who had first diagnosed Liam's heart condition. He was in casual clothes, jeans and a plaid shirt, so different from the white coat she associated with him. "Dr. Harmon," she said, her voice barely audible. "I've been trying to reach you," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "The hospital called me about Liam's surgery today. I didn't know it had been scheduled so quickly." Ellen's heart raced. Yes, it was unexpected." Dr. Harmon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ellen, is everything okay? I heard Liam was admitted to Mercy last night. The paperwork said he was brought in by his grandfather." His eyes searched hers. "I didn't know Liam had grandparents in the picture." The word, grandfather, hit Ellen like a physical blow. Grandfather, not father. Jonathan Baird had told the hospital he was Liam's grandfather. The implication made her dizzy. "It's complicated," she managed, echoing what she'd told Officer Danvers. "Dr." Harmon's expression was kind but concerned. "Well, I wanted to let you know that all the expenses have been covered. The surgery, the aftercare, everything." Ellen blinked, not comprehending. "Covered? By who?" "Anonymous donor," Dr. Harmon said, watching her reaction carefully. "The hospital administrator received a wire transfer this morning with specific instructions that it was for Liam Reeves's care. It's substantial. Enough to cover the best surgeon in the state and at least a year of follow-up care." Ellen clutched the milk carton tighter, her knuckles turning white. Jonathan had not only taken Liam to the best hospital, but had paid for everything. A sum that must have been more money than Ellen would see in her lifetime. Thank you for telling me," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Dr. Harmon nodded, then hesitated before adding, "Ellen, if you need help, any kind of help, please call me. I've been worried about you and the boys." She nodded numbly, and he left with a final concerned glance. Ellen paid for the milk with trembling hands, her mind racing with this new information. An anonymous donation. Jonathan Baird playing the role of grandfather. The photograph of a woman who looked just like her. Outside the mini-mart, Ellen took a deep breath of the cool morning air. She needed to go to the hospital to see Liam before his surgery. But first, there was one more stop she had to make. The row of trailers where Ellen lived was at the edge of town, separated from the main road by a small field that often flooded during heavy rains. At the end of the row, somewhat apart from the others, stood a smaller, older trailer. It belonged to Margaret Holden, a woman in her 70s who rarely spoke to anyone. Margaret had lived in Pinewood for decades, but few people knew anything about her. She kept to herself, tending to the scraggly vegetable garden behind her trailer and occasionally feeding the stray cats that roamed the area. Ellen had exchanged only a handful of words with her in the 3 years she'd lived there, but Margaret had been watching Ellen yesterday when she returned from giving Liam to Jonathan. Ellen had felt the woman's eyes on her from behind the faded curtains of her trailer, and something about that gaze, knowing, almost expectant, had stayed with her. Ellen knocked on Margaret's door, her heart pounding. For a long moment there was no response. Then slowly, the door creaked open, revealing Margaret's lined face and sharp blue eyes. "I've been waiting for you," Margaret said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone so frail-looking. "Come in, child." The interior of Margaret's trailer was neat but cramped, filled with old furniture and the smell of herbal tea. Margaret gestured for Ellen to sit at a small table covered with a crocheted doily. "You have questions," Margaret said. It wasn't a question. Ellen took the photograph from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Do you know who this is?" Margaret didn't even glance at the photo. Sarah Baird, Jonathan's sister. The confirmation sent a jolt through Ellen's body. "And who am I to her?" Margaret's eyes softened. "You really don't know, do you?" She sighed, then stood and shuffled to an old wooden cabinet. From it, she extracted a yellowed envelope. "This came for you, years ago. I should have given it to you when you first moved here, but I was afraid. Afraid of what it might do to you." Ellen stared at the envelope, addressed simply to Ellen, care of the trailer park. "It's from him," Margaret said. "The twins' father." Ellen's hand shook as she reached for the envelope. How did you know?" "I've been the manager of this park for 30 years, Margaret said. "I keep track of who comes and goes. And I remember when a young man in an expensive car came looking for you, about a year ago. He asked about you, about the babies. I didn't tell him anything." Ellen's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because he looked like trouble," Margaret said simply. "And you've had enough of that in your life." With trembling fingers, Ellen opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in elegant handwriting. Her eyes scanned the first few lines and her breath caught. "Dear Ellen, if you're reading this, it means you've returned to Pinewood. I've been searching for you ever since that night. What I did was unforgivable, but please know that it wasn't what you think. There are things you don't know about your past, about who you really are. I can't come to you directly. It would put you in danger. But know that I've arranged for your children's care if anything should happen. My family will pay for whatever they need. The truth is complicated, Ellen, but you deserve to know. J. Baird." The signature at the bottom made Ellen's blood run cold. J. Baird. Not Jonathan, but someone with the same last name. The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. "Who is J. Baird?" she whispered. Margaret's expression was grave. "Jonathan Baird's son, James." The corridors of Mercy Hospital gleamed with sterility and privilege. Polished marble floors reflected the soft overhead lighting, creating an atmosphere of hushed competence that was worlds away from the county hospital where Ellen had first taken Liam. Here, nurses wore tailored uniforms that looked more like designer scrubs, and the waiting room featured leather chairs and a water feature that trickled soothingly in the background. Jonathan Baird stood at the window of the pediatric intensive care unit, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. He hadn't slept. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. But he didn't care about appearances now. All that mattered was the tiny figure in the incubator before him, connected to machines that beeped and hummed with reassuring regularity. Liam looked even smaller in the hospital bed, his skin almost translucent under the medical lights. The doctors had stabilized him overnight, preparing him for the complex heart surgery scheduled for noon. Jonathan watched the gentle rise and fall of the baby's chest, each breath a small miracle that squeezed his heart with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "Mr. Baird?" A nurse approached, her voice gentle but professional. "Dr. Winters would like to speak with you about the procedure." Jonathan nodded without taking his eyes off Liam. "I'll be right there." When the nurse left, he placed his palm against the glass separating him from the child. "I won't fail you," he whispered. "Not like I failed him." The hallway to Dr. Winters' office felt endless. Jonathan's mind drifted back to another hospital, another time. 7 years ago, the emergency room at Lake Memorial. the frantic calls over the intercom, the doctor's grim faces as they told him they couldn't save his son. James had been 7 years old, a bright, curious boy with a mischievous smile and a gift for mathematics. The boating accident had been so sudden. One moment they were laughing, fishing off the dock of their lake house, and the next, James was gone, pulled under by the current from a passing speedboat. By the time Jonathan dove in and found him, it was too late. The memory still had the power to bring Jonathan to his knees. He steadied himself against the wall, taking deep breaths until the pain subsided to its usual dull ache. He couldn't afford to break down now, not when Liam needed him. Dr. Winter's office was at the end of the corridor, a spacious room with certificates covering one wall and family photos on the desk. The doctor himself was in his 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the confident demeanor of someone at the top of his field. "Mr. Baird," he said, rising to shake Jonathan's hand. "Please have a seat." Jonathan sat stiffly, his body tense with anticipation. "How is he?" "Stable, which is excellent news," Dr. Winters said, opening a file on his tablet. "We've run additional tests, and I believe we can correct the ventricular septal defect with minimal risk. It's a relatively common congenital heart condition, though Liam's case is more severe than most." Jonathan nodded, absorbing the information with the same focus he applied to business decisions. "And the recovery? With proper care, he should make a full recovery. Children are remarkably resilient." Dr. Winters paused, studying Jonathan's face. "If you don't mind my asking, how long have you known about your grandson's condition?" The word grandson made Jonathan flinch internally, though his expression remained neutral. "Not long enough," he answered quietly. "Doctor." Winters seemed to sense the weight behind those words. He nodded and continued with the medical details, explaining the procedure step by step. Jonathan listened carefully, asking precise questions about risks, recovery time, and long-term prognosis. By the time the conversation ended, he felt marginally more in control. As he left the office, a young nurse approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Baird, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something I thought you should know." Jonathan tensed. "What is it?" "It's about Liam. I noticed something when we were bathing him." She lowered her voice. "He has a birthmark on his left shoulder. It's unusual, like a small crescent moon." The world seemed to tilt beneath Jonathan's feet. A crescent moon birthmark, exactly like James had, exactly like Jonathan himself had, hidden beneath his tailored shirt. "Are you all right, sir?" The nurse's concerned voice sounded distant, as if coming from underwater. "Yes," Jonathan managed, though he felt anything but all right. "Thank you for telling me." He walked back to the PQ viewing window, his mind racing. It couldn't be a coincidence. The birthmark was hereditary. His father had had it, and his grandfather before him. Every male in the Baird line for generations, which meant Liam was a Baird. Jonathan's hands trembled as he took out his phone and opened a photo album he rarely allowed himself to look at. Pictures of James filled the screen, playing baseball, opening Christmas presents, asleep on the couch with a book open on his chest. And there, in a beach photo from their last summer together, clearly visible on James's shoulder, the crescent moon birthmark. A memory surfaced. James at 16, rebellious and angry after his mother's death. The arguments. The night he stormed out, taking Jonathan's car. The months of silence that followed. Jonathan had hired private investigators to find him, but James had always been clever. He'd disappeared completely, only to return 6 months later, subdued and different. They'd never spoken about where he'd been or what he'd done during that time. And then, just when they were beginning to rebuild their relationship, the accident happened. Could James have fathered a child during those missing months? Could he have met Ellen? The timeline fit. The twins couldn't be more than 6 months old, which would place their conception around the time of James's death. Had he known Ellen was pregnant when he died? Had he been trying to tell Jonathan something in those final days? Something Jonathan had been too grief-stricken to hear? A wave of dizziness washed over him. If Liam was James's son, that would make him Jonathan's grandson, and Noah too, and Ellen. The realization hit him with such force that he had to sit down on a nearby bench. Ellen wasn't just the mother of his grandchildren. She was connected to him in another way, a connection he'd glimpsed the moment he saw her standing in the rain, looking so much like Sarah. The security guard at the PICU entrance approached. "Sir, there's a young woman at reception asking about the baby, says she's the mother." Jonathan's heart raced. Ellen was here. She'd come for Liam. Of course she had. What mother wouldn't? He'd been a fool to think she would simply hand over her child and disappear. "Tell her," he began, then stopped. What could he possibly say? How could he explain what he'd done, what he suspected? "Tell her I'll be right down." As he rode the elevator to the lobby, Jonathan tried to compose himself. He had taken Ellen's child in a moment of desperate recognition. He had seen James in Liam's tiny features, had felt a connection he couldn't explain. But now, faced with the reality of what he'd done, shame washed over him. The elevator doors opened, revealing the hospital lobby. And there, standing at the reception desk, was Ellen, small, exhausted, determined. As their eyes met across the polished floor, Jonathan knew that the time for secrets was over. Whether she knew it or not, Ellen was family, and family deserved the truth, no matter how painful. Ellen stood in the pristine lobby of Mercy Hospital, feeling desperately out of place. Everything around her screamed money and privilege, from the original artwork on the walls to the fresh flower arrangements that perfumed the air. Mothers in designer clothes pushed strollers worth more than everything Ellen owned. Doctors in crisp white coats moved with the confidence of people who had never worried about their next meal. And then there was Ellen, in her faded jeans and worn sweater, hair hastily pulled back, dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night. The receptionist had given her a look that was equal parts pity and suspicion when she'd asked about Liam. "I'm sorry, but only family members are authorized to visit patients in the PQ," the woman had said, not sounding sorry at all. "I'm his mother," Ellen had replied, her voice breaking slightly on the word. The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows had risen. "Oh, well, our records show that he was admitted by his grandfather, Mr. Baird. Perhaps you should speak with him first." And now Jonathan Baird was walking toward her across the lobby, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. He looked older in the daylight, the lines on his face deeper, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. But there was something else in his expression too, a strange mixture of recognition and grief that made Ellen's heart race. "Ellen," he said softly, stopping a few feet away from her. "You came." "Of course I came," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He's my son." Jonathan glanced around the busy lobby, then gestured toward a side hallway. "Let's talk somewhere private." Ellen hesitated, then nodded. She followed him to a small consultation room, furnished with comfortable chairs and soft lighting, designed to deliver difficult news in a comfortable setting. Jonathan closed the door behind them, and suddenly they were alone, the weight of unspoken truths hanging between them. "How is he?" Ellen asked immediately, unable to bear the silence. "Stable," Jonathan said. "The surgery is still scheduled for noon. Dr. Winters, the surgeon, is confident it will be successful." Ellen exhaled shakily, relief flooding through her. "Can I see him?" "Yes, of course." Jonathan ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture that reminded Ellen painfully of someone else, though she couldn't place who. "Ellen, there are things we need to discuss." "Like why you told them you're his grandfather," Ellen challenged, the words coming out sharper than she'd intended. "Or why you had a picture of a woman who looks exactly like me." Jonathan flinched, but didn't look away. "Yes? Both of those things. And more." He took a deep breath. "The woman in the photograph was my sister, Sarah. Margaret told me," Ellen said quietly. "She also gave me this." She pulled the letter from her pocket, the paper now worn at the creases from how many times she'd unfolded and reread it during her walk to the hospital. Jonathan's face paled when he saw it. "A letter? From whom?" "It's signed J. Baird," Ellen said, watching his reaction closely. "Margaret said it was from your son, James." Jonathan sank into one of the chairs, his legs seemingly unable to support him any longer. "James," he whispered, the name heavy with grief. "My son, the father of my children," Ellen stated, the reality of it still strange on her tongue. Jonathan looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and wonder. "Yes, I believe so. I didn't know. Not until last night when I saw you. You looked so much like Sarah that I wondered. And then when I saw Liam, I felt such a strong connection. But it wasn't until this morning when a nurse pointed out his birthmark." "The crescent moon," Ellen interrupted, her hand instinctively moving to her own shoulder, though her birthmark was on the opposite side. "Noah has it too." on his right shoulder. Jonathan's breath caught. "You have it as well?" Ellen nodded slowly. "I never knew where it came from. I was abandoned as a baby, raised in foster care. I never knew my birth parents." "Sarah," Jonathan said softly. "My sister." "She was your mother, Ellen." The words hung in the air between them, enormous and life-altering. Ellen felt her knees weaken, and she gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "That's not possible," she whispered, though even as she said it, pieces were falling into place. Her resemblance to the woman in the photo, Jonathan's reaction when he first saw her, the strange sense of familiarity she'd felt toward him despite never having met him before. "Sarah was 19 when she got pregnant," Jonathan continued, his voice distant as if recalling events from another lifetime. "Our parents were traditional, strict. They wanted her to give the baby up for adoption to avoid the scandal. Sarah refused. She ran away to have the baby, in secret. But there were complications. She didn't survive the birth." Ellen's legs gave way, and she sank into the chair opposite Jonathan. The room seemed to spin around her as his words penetrated the fog of disbelief. "Our parents arranged for a private adoption," Jonathan went on. "They told me the baby had died along with Sarah. It wasn't until years later, after they passed away, that I found Sarah's journals. She wrote about her plans, about a friend who would help her. I've been searching for you ever since, but all the trails went cold." Ellen stared at the letter in her hands, the elegant handwriting blurring through her tears. "And James? How does he fit into this?" A shadow passed over Jonathan's face. "James was my son. He was troubled after his mother died. When he was 16, he rebelled, disappeared for months. When he came back, he was different, more mature, but also sadder somehow. We were just beginning to rebuild our relationship when..." His voice broke. "There was an accident. A boating accident at our lake house. He was only 23. Ellen's mind raced, calculating dates. 7 years ago? Jonathan nodded, grief etched into every line of his face. "Yes, that's when I met him," Ellen whispered. "I was 18, working at a diner near the community college. He came in every day for a week, always sat in my section, always left a generous tip." She closed her eyes, the memories washing over her. "He never told me his last name, just that he was from a complicated family, that he needed space to figure things out." She opened the letter again, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers. "We spent 3 months together. It was intense, but then he just disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye. I tried to find him, but all I had was a first name and a burner phone number that no longer worked. That would have been right before the accident," Jonathan said quietly. "He came home changed, distracted. I thought it was just part of his growing up, finding his place in the world. I never imagined. I didn't know I was pregnant until after he was gone," Ellen continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "By then, I'd given up hope of finding him. And when the twins came and Liam's heart condition was diagnosed, I was just trying to survive." Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Ellen, listen to me. If what we both suspect is true, then you are my niece, Sarah's daughter. And the twins are my grandsons, James's children. We're family." The word family hit Ellen like a physical blow. Family, something she'd never truly had, something she'd stopped believing in long ago. I can't," she shook her head, overwhelmed. "I know it's a lot to take in," Jonathan said gently, "but right now Liam needs us both. Will you come see him?" Ellen nodded, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. "Yes, please." As they stood to leave, Ellen unfolded the letter one last time, her eyes catching on the final lines she hadn't shared with Jonathan. "The truth is complicated, Ellen, but you deserve to know. J. Baird. P.S. If anything ever happens to me, go to the lake house, the blue room, under the floorboards. The truth is there. A truth she was only now beginning to understand. A truth that would change everything." The pediatric intensive care unit at Mercy Hospital was a world away from the chaotic emergency rooms Ellen had experienced before. Here, the beeping of monitors created a soothing symphony rather than a jarring cacophony. The nurses moved with quiet efficiency, their voices gentle, their smiles genuine. Everything smelled of antiseptic and lavender, a strange but not unpleasant combination. Ellen pressed her palm against the glass window, watching Liam's tiny chest rise and fall beneath the tangle of wires and tubes. He looked so fragile, so vulnerable, yet somehow more peaceful than he had in weeks. The oxygen flowing into his lungs had brought color back to his cheeks, replacing the bluish tinge that had haunted Ellen's nightmares. "He's a fighter," Jonathan said quietly, standing beside her. "Like his father." Ellen nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Like his father. Like James. The man she had loved with reckless abandon for 3 whirlwind months. The man who had given her the greatest gifts of her life before vanishing without a trace. Now she understood why he had disappeared. Why he had never returned to her. He couldn't return. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Reeves? Dr. Winters would like to speak with you and Mr. Baird before the surgery." Ellen followed the nurse to a small conference room. Jonathan a step behind her. "Doctor." Winters was waiting, his expression grave but kind. He explained the procedure in detail. How they would repair the hole in Liam's heart. The risks involved. The expected recovery time. Ellen listened with growing anxiety, imagining her tiny baby under the surgeon's knife. "Do you have any questions?" Dr. Winters asked when he had finished. Ellen shook her head, too overwhelmed to speak. "We'll take good care of him," the doctor promised, his hand briefly touching her shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. "He's in the best possible hands." When Dr. Winters left, silence fell between Ellen and Jonathan. The reality of what was happening, what had already happened, seemed too enormous to process. Ellen stared at her hands, noticing for the first time how much they resembled the woman's in the photograph. Sarah's hands. Her mother's hands. "Ellen," Jonathan began, his voice hesitant. "There's something else we need to discuss." She looked up, sensing the shift in his tone. "Liam's surgery is just the beginning," he continued. "He'll need specialized care, ongoing treatment. And Noah is perfectly healthy." Ellen interrupted, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "For now," Jonathan said gently, "but these conditions can sometimes run in families. He should be thoroughly examined, just to be safe." Ellen nodded reluctantly. She couldn't argue with that logic, even if it terrified her to think that Noah might also have a ticking time bomb in his little chest. "I want to help," Jonathan continued. "Not just with Liam's surgery, but with everything. I want to give you and the boys the life you deserve." Ellen studied his face, searching for hidden motives. But all she saw was sincerity and something deeper, a loneliness that mirrored her own. "Why?" "Because you're family," he answered simply. "My only family. Sarah's daughter. James's," his voice caught. "James's children. You're all I have left in this world." Ellen felt the weight of his words, the responsibility they carried. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jonathan took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I have a house on Lake Michigan. It's quiet, private, with plenty of room for you and the boys. I want you all to come live there. I'll provide everything you need. The best medical care, education, opportunities. You'll never have to worry about money again." The offer hung in the air between them, almost too good to be true. Ellen thought of the trailer park, of Mrs. Patterson's oxygen tank wheezing in the background as she cared for Noah. She thought of the constant struggle to keep the electricity on, to afford formula and diapers. She thought of Liam's blue lips and labored breathing. "And what do you want in return?" she asked cautiously. Jonathan's expression hardened slightly, a flash of the businessman he was known to be. "I want custody of Liam." "What?" Ellen gasped. "Legal custody," Jonathan clarified. "Sole custody." Ellen felt as if she'd been doused in ice water. "You want me to give up my son? After everything I've done to keep him alive?" "Not give him up," Jonathan said, his voice tight with emotion. "But legally, he would be mine. You would still live with us, still be his mother in every way that matters. But I would make the decisions about his care." "And Noah?" Ellen demanded, anger beginning to replace shock. "Noah stays with you, your legal son in every way." Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "But there's one more condition." Ellen braced herself, her heart pounding. "You would have to disappear," he said. "Legally, I mean. Ellen Reeves would cease to exist. I would provide you with a new identity, a new background. You would become someone else entirely." "Why?" Ellen whispered, horror creeping through her veins. Jonathan's expression darkened. "There are complications, things about your background, about Sarah's death, that could put you in danger if the wrong people discovered who you really are." "What people? What danger?" Ellen demanded. "I can't explain everything now. Jonathan said, glancing at his watch. "Liam's surgery is in an hour, but trust me when I say that this is the safest option for all of you." Ellen stood up, anger propelling her to her feet. "How dare you? You take my son in the middle of the night, discover we're related, and now you want me to sign away my rights and my identity? Based on some vague threat you won't even explain?" Jonathan remained seated, his expression calm but determined. "I understand your anger, but consider what I'm offering, Ellen. A life of security and privilege for you and the boys. The best medical care for Liam. The best education for them both. Never having to worry about money again. At the cost of my son and my identity," Ellen retorted. "At the cost of paperwork," Jonathan countered. "Liam would still be with you every day. You would still be his mother in every way that matters. The legal arrangement is just protection." Ellen paced the small room, her mind racing. Protection from what? Jonathan sighed heavily. "From the people who killed Sarah. The people who might come after you if they knew who you really are." Ellen froze. "Killed? I thought you said there were complications with the birth." "That was the official story," Jonathan said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The truth is much darker. Sarah was murdered, Ellen. And if certain people discover that her daughter is alive, that you're alive, you could be in danger too." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ellen's feet. "Murdered? By whom?" "I don't have all the answers," Jonathan admitted. "I've been searching for years. That's why I need you to trust me. To let me protect you and the boys, at least until I can uncover the whole truth." Ellen felt trapped, cornered by circumstances she couldn't control. On one hand, Jonathan's offer meant safety and security for her children, everything she'd ever wanted to give them. On the other hand, it meant surrendering her autonomy, her identity, and her legal rights to Liam. "I need time to think," she said finally, her voice barely audible. Jonathan nodded, his expression softening. "Of course, but not too much time. Liam's surgery is just the beginning of his journey. The decisions we make today will shape his entire future." As if on cue, a nurse appeared at the door. "Mr. Baird, Ms. Reeves, it's time to prepare Liam for surgery." Ellen's heart constricted. The moment of truth had arrived, and she wasn't ready. But then, how could any mother ever be ready to hand her child over to surgeons, to trust strangers with the tiny life she had created? She followed the nurse back to the PICU, Jonathan a step behind her. At Liam's bedside, she bent to kiss his forehead, inhaling his sweet baby scent beneath the antiseptic hospital smell. "Be strong, my little lion," she whispered. "Mommy loves you more than anything." As the nurses wheeled Liam toward the operating room, Ellen felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Jonathan watching her, his eyes filled with a mixture of grief and hope. "Whatever you decide," he said softly, "know this. You are not alone anymore. Not ever again." And in that moment, standing in the sterile hospital corridor as her son was taken away, Ellen realized that Jonathan's words were both a comfort and a threat, a promise of protection that came with golden handcuffs. The surgery waiting room at Mercy Hospital was designed to soothe anxious families. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, tasteful artwork on the walls. A volunteer offered Ellen coffee from a silver carafe, but she declined, her stomach too knotted with fear to accept anything. 3 hours had passed since they'd taken Liam into surgery. 3 hours of silent prayers and bargaining with a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Jonathan sat across from her, his face a mask of composed worry. He'd made several phone calls, his voice low and urgent, though Ellen couldn't make out the words. Occasionally, their eyes would meet across the room, and Ellen would look away quickly, still reeling from his proposal. Give up Liam. Give up her identity. Disappear into a new life of wealth and security, but at what cost? "Ellen," Jonathan said, breaking the heavy silence between them. "There's something you should see." He held out his phone, opened to a photo album. Ellen hesitated, then took the device. On the screen was a picture of a young boy, maybe 7 years old, with sandy brown hair and a gap-toothed smile. He was holding a fishing rod, beaming with pride. The resemblance to Noah was uncanny. "James," Jonathan said softly, "at Higgins Lake, the summer before." He didn't need to finish. Ellen swiped through the photos, hungry for glimpses of the man she had known so briefly, yet so intimately. James as a teenager, solemn-faced at what appeared to be a funeral. James in a graduation cap and gown. James on a sailboat, laughing into the camera, his eyes crinkling at the corners. just as they had when he'd smiled at her across the diner counter. "He never told me about his family," Ellen whispered. "Just that it was complicated, that he needed space to figure things out." Jonathan's expression softened. James struggled after his mother died. He felt confined by our world, by the expectations placed on him. When he disappeared that summer, I was frantic. Hired private investigators, offered rewards. Nothing. "He was with me," Ellen said, still gazing at the photos. "In a little town 200 miles from here, working odd jobs, living in a rented room above the diner where I worked." She looked up, meeting Jonathan's eyes. "He was happy. At least I thought he was. I believe he was," Jonathan said gently. "When he came home, there was a piece about him I hadn't seen in years. I didn't know what had changed, but I was grateful." His voice broke slightly. "If only I'd known about you, about the babies." Ellen handed the phone back, unable to look at James's face any longer. It hurt too much, seeing the echoes of her sons in his features. "Ms. Reeves?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Dr. Winters would like to speak with you both." Ellen's heart lurched. Had something gone wrong? Was Liam? "The surgery was successful," Dr. Winters announced as soon as they entered his office. "We were able to repair the ventricular septal defect completely. Liam's in recovery now, and while the next 24 hours are critical, I'm optimistic about his prognosis." Relief washed over Ellen like a physical force, bringing tears to her eyes. "Can I see him?" "In about an hour," Dr. Winters replied. "He's still being monitored closely in post-op." Jonathan thanked the doctor profusely, shaking his hand and discussing follow-up care with the precision of someone used to managing complex business deals. Ellen watched him, noting how naturally he assumed control of the situation, how easily people deferred to him. Was this what life would be like if she accepted his offer? Living in his shadow, dependent on his authority and connections? When they left Dr. Winters' office, Ellen made a decision. "I need to go check on Noah," she said firmly. "And I need time to think about everything." Jonathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course. My driver can take you wherever you need to go." Ellen shook her head. "No, I need to do this alone." For a moment she thought he might argue, but then he simply handed her a business card with his personal number written on the back. "Call me anytime, day or night." Outside the hospital, Ellen took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling as if she'd been underwater for hours. Her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Relief that Liam's surgery had been successful, fear about Jonathan's warnings, confusion about her own identity. She needed answers, and she knew where to find them. The bus ride to the county records office took nearly an hour, giving Ellen time to collect her thoughts. If what Jonathan had told her was true, if she really was Sarah Baird's daughter, if Sarah had been murdered, there might be records, newspaper articles, something to corroborate his story. The records office was housed in a drab government building downtown, all fluorescent lighting and linoleum floors. Ellen approached the front desk hesitantly, unsure how to begin. "Can I help you?" asked an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, "Patricia." "I'm researching a family matter," Ellen said. "A death that occurred about 25 years ago." "Sarah Baird?" Patricia's expression changed subtly. "Baird? As in Jonathan Baird's family?" Ellen nodded, surprised by the immediate recognition. "That was quite a case," Patricia said, lowering her voice. "Not one people around here have forgotten." Ellen's pulse quickened. "What can you tell me about it?" Patricia glanced around, then gestured for Ellen to follow her to a quieter corner of the room. The official story was that she died from complications during childbirth, but there were rumors, whispers about foul play. "Foul play?" Ellen repeated, her voice barely audible. "Sarah Baird was only 19, but she was asking dangerous questions about her family's business dealings," Patricia explained. "The Bairds weren't just wealthy. They were powerful, connected to people you didn't want to cross." Ellen felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of business dealings?" Patricia shook her head. "I don't know the details, but there was a nurse who worked at Pinewood General back then, Rita Morales. She was on duty the night Sarah died. Always claimed things didn't add up, that the official report was a cover-up." "Is she still around?" Ellen asked eagerly. "Last I heard, she was working at the Silver Pines retirement home on the edge of town," Patricia said. "Retired from nursing years ago, but couldn't stay away from caregiving." Ellen thanked her and hurried out, her mind racing. The bus to Silver Pines took another 40 minutes, during which Ellen called Mrs. Patterson to check on Noah. He was fine, sleeping peacefully, unaware that his world was about to change forever. Silver Pine's retirement home was a modest but well-maintained facility surrounded by tall pine trees. At the reception desk, Ellen asked for Rita Morales and was directed to a sunny common room where elderly residents played cards and watched television. Rita was easy to spot, a petite woman with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun, helping a resident with a jigsaw puzzle. Her movements were efficient, her manner gentle but no nonsense. Rita Morales? Ellen approached cautiously. The woman looked up, dark eyes sharp and assessing. Yes, can I help you? My name is Ellen. Ellen Reeves. I wanted to ask you about Sarah Baird. Rita's expression froze. She glanced around the room, then back at Ellen. Why would you ask me about that? Because I think, Ellen swallowed hard, I think I might be her daughter. Rita stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Come with me. They walked in silence to a small office where Rita closed the door firmly behind them. Let me look at you, she said, studying Ellen's face intently. Yes, you have her eyes. Her mouth. How did you find me? County Records Office, Ellen explained. They said you were on duty the night she died. The night she was killed, Rita corrected sharply. Make no mistake about that. Ellen's breath caught. So it's true. She was murdered? Rita's expression was grim. I've spent 25 years trying to prove it. The official cause of death was hemorrhage during childbirth, but I saw her just hours before. She was fine, nervous, but healthy. No signs of distress. What happened? There was a man, Rita said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He came to see her, well-dressed, expensive watch. I wasn't supposed to let anyone in, but he had credentials. Said he was from Child Services, there to discuss adoption arrangements. Ellen leaned forward, hanging on every word. After he left, everything went wrong, Rita continued. Sarah started bleeding. It happened so fast. By the time the doctor arrived, she was gone. And the baby, you, was rushed away. I was told you didn't make it either. But I did, Ellen whispered. Obviously, Rita said, her eyes softening. Someone must have smuggled you out, faked your death. Who would do that? Ellen asked. And why? Rita shook her head. I don't know. But the man who visited Sarah that day? I saw him again years later on the news. He was an enforcer for the Castellano family. Castellano? As in the crime family? The same, Rita confirmed. They had connections with several prominent families in this area, including the Bairds. Ellen's mind reeled with the implications. If the Castellanos had killed her mother, and if they discovered she was still alive. Suddenly, Jonathan's warnings made terrible sense. His insistence on a new identity, on legal protections, on secrecy. It wasn't just controlling behavior. It was fear. Fear for her safety. Fear for the twins. I need to go, Ellen said abruptly, standing. Thank you for telling me this. Rita caught her arm. Be careful, girl. If you're digging into this now, you're stirring up dangerous waters. The Castellanos have long memories. Ellen nodded, her decision made. She needed to get back to the hospital, back to Liam, and she needed to talk to Jonathan. Whatever his faults, whatever his motives, he was the only one who could help her navigate this dangerous new reality. As she hurried to the bus stop, her phone rang, an unknown number. Ellen answered hesitantly. Ellen? It's Dr. Harmon. The pediatrician's voice was tense. You need to come to County General right away. It's Noah. Mrs. Patterson brought him in. He's having trouble breathing. The world seemed to stop. Not Noah. Not both her babies. I'll be right there, she managed, her voice a strange, distant thing. As she ran for the bus, one thought crystallized in her mind. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, she would protect her children, even if it meant becoming someone else entirely. County General Hospital was a stark contrast to the luxury of Mercy. The emergency room buzzed with barely controlled chaos. Crying children, harried nurses, the constant beeping of monitors competing with overhead announcements. The smell of antiseptic couldn't quite mask the underlying odors of sickness and fear. Ellen pushed through the double doors, her heart pounding painfully against her ribs. She spotted Mrs. Patterson immediately, her oxygen tank beside her as she sat in a plastic chair in the waiting area, wringing her hands. Where is he? Ellen demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. They took him back right away, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice trembling. He was fine all morning, I swear. Then suddenly he started breathing funny, all wheezy and gasping. His lips turned blue, just like... She trailed off, unable to finish the comparison to Liam. A cold weight settled in Ellen's stomach. The same symptoms, the same crisis. Both twins affected after all. Ms. Reeves? Dr. Harmon appeared, his scrubs wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he was nearing the end of a long shift. Come with me. Ellen followed him through a maze of curtained areas to a small treatment room, where Noah lay in a hospital crib, an oxygen mask dwarfing his tiny face. A nurse adjusted an IV line running into his arm. The sight of her robust, healthy twin now reduced to this fragile state nearly broke Ellen. What happened? She whispered, reaching out to touch Noah's cheek. His oxygen levels dropped suddenly. Dr. Harmon explained, checking the monitors. We're running tests, but given Liam's diagnosis and the fact that they're identical twins, the same heart defect. Ellen finished for him. Dr. Harmon nodded grimly. It's likely. We'll need to do an echocardiogram to confirm, but the symptoms are consistent. Ellen sank into the chair beside the crib, her legs no longer able to support her. Both her babies, both suffering from the same life-threatening condition. And she, alone, with no resources, no insurance, no way to save them. Except she wasn't alone anymore. Whether she liked it or not, she had Jonathan now. Jonathan, with his wealth and connections. Jonathan, who had already saved Liam. I need to make a call, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. In the hallway, she dialed the number Jonathan had given her. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for her call. Ellen? Where are you? Liam's out of recovery, asking for you. The concern in his voice, genuine, not manufactured, caught her off guard. I'm at County General. It's Noah. He's showing the same symptoms Liam had. A sharp intake of breath. I'll be right there. Don't do anything, sign anything until I arrive. I'm bringing Dr. Winters with me. Jonathan, Ellen said, her voice cracking. I can't lose them. Either of them. You won't, he promised, his tone fierce with determination. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Jonathan arrived exactly 20 minutes later, accompanied by Dr. Winters and 2 nurses. They swept into the emergency room like a hurricane, Jonathan's authority creating a path through the chaos. Within minutes, arrangements were being made to transfer Noah to Mercy Hospital. He needs the same surgery Liam had, Dr. Winters confirmed after examining Noah. And soon. The defect appears to be nearly identical. Can you do it tonight? Jonathan asked. Dr. Winters nodded. I'll push back my other cases. This child can't wait. As the medical team prepared Noah for transfer, Jonathan drew Ellen aside. Have you thought about what we discussed? He asked quietly. Ellen met his gaze directly. I went to the county records office. I spoke to a nurse who was there the night Sarah died. Rita Morales. Jonathan's face paled. Rita is still alive? I've been trying to find her for years. She confirmed what you said, about Sarah being murdered, about the Castellano connection. Ellen took a deep breath. I'll accept your offer, for the boy's sake, but I have conditions of my own. Jonathan's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm listening. I want to be part of all decisions regarding both boys. Legal papers or not, they are my sons. Ellen's voice was firm, brooking no argument. And I want access to everything you know about Sarah's death. Everything. No more secrets. Jonathan studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed. We're in this together now. As they followed the gurney carrying Noah to the waiting ambulance, Ellen felt a strange sense of peace amidst the chaos. She was making the right decision, the only decision possible. Her children would live, would thrive, would have opportunities she could never have provided on her own. The cost, her identity, her autonomy, seemed a small price in comparison. The ride to Mercy Hospital passed in a blur. Noah was whisked away for immediate pre-surgical preparation, leaving Ellen and Jonathan in the same waiting room they'd occupied hours earlier during Liam's surgery. I want to see Liam, Ellen said, suddenly desperate to hold at least one of her babies. Jonathan led her to the recovery ward, where Liam lay in a private room filled with stuffed animals and flowers. Jonathan's doing, no doubt. Despite the tubes and monitors, Liam looked better than he had in weeks. His color was good, his breathing even and unlabored. He's doing remarkably well, the recovery nurse said, smiling. Strong little guy. Ellen bent to kiss his forehead, breathing in his scent. Mommy's here, little lion, she whispered. And Noah's here too. You'll both be okay." When she straightened, she found Jonathan watching her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "They're so much like James," he said softly. "The same determination, and the same heart condition," Ellen noted. "Is it hereditary? Did James have it too?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, at least not that we ever knew. But there were rumors about the Baird line having a history of heart problems. My father died of a heart attack at 50. His father too." They sat in silence for a while, watching Liam sleep. Then Jonathan spoke again, his voice hesitant. "When I saw you standing in the rain that night, with Liam in your arms, it was like seeing a ghost. You look so much like Sarah. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating." He paused. "I've been alone for so long, Ellen. After James died, I had no one. Nothing but my work, my money. Empty things." Ellen felt a surprising surge of compassion for this man, this powerful, wealthy, lonely man who had lost everyone he loved. "We're not alone anymore," she said softly. "Either of us." The hours of Noah's surgery stretched endlessly. Ellen alternated between sitting with Liam and pacing the waiting room. Jonathan made calls, arranged for a nursery to be prepared at his lake house, consulted with lawyers about the custody arrangements and Ellen's new identity. Finally, Dr. Winters appeared, looking tired but satisfied. The surgery was successful. Noah's defect was slightly less severe than Liam's, which is good news for his recovery. Relief flooded through Ellen, leaving her weak-kneed and trembling. Both her babies would live. Both would have a chance at a normal, healthy life. As they walked toward the recovery room to see Noah, Jonathan placed a gentle hand on Ellen's shoulder. "I've been thinking about your conditions," he said, "and I want to offer a modification to our arrangement." Ellen tensed. "What kind of modification? Instead of me taking sole custody of Liam, what if we shared custody of both boys? Legal guardians, together." His expression was earnest, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "They need both of us, Ellen, and we're stronger together than apart." Ellen stared at him, processing this unexpected proposal. Why the change of heart? Jonathan's smile was sad, tinged with regret. "Watching you with Liam, I realized something. I've been trying to reclaim what I lost, James, my family. But the past is gone. What matters now is the future. These boys. You." He paused. "We're family, Ellen. The only family either of us has left. And family protects each other." In the recovery room, Noah slept peacefully, his surgery complete, his future suddenly full of possibilities. Ellen touched his tiny hand, marveling at the perfect fingers, the strength in his grip even as he slept. "Family," she repeated softly, testing the word, the concept. After a lifetime of feeling adrift, of belonging nowhere and to no one, the idea of family, of roots and connections and belonging, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Yes," she said finally, looking up at Jonathan. "We'll do this together. For them." Jonathan's expression softened with relief and something else. Hope, perhaps. The beginning of healing for wounds that had festered for decades. Outside the window, the sun broke through clouds that had threatened rain all day, casting golden light across the hospital room. It illuminated the three of them, Ellen, Jonathan, and baby Noah, painting them in warm hues that spoke of new beginnings. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be danger from the Castellanos, complications from Ellen's new identity, the challenges of raising twin boys with medical needs. But for the first time in her life, Ellen wasn't facing the future alone. Sometimes, she realized, family isn't about blood or names or legal documents. Sometimes it's about the people who stay when it would be easier to leave, the people who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself, the people who see your worth when you've forgotten it exists. As if sensing her thoughts, Jonathan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and eased the lines of grief that had been etched there for so long. "We'll be okay," he said simply, and looking at her son, at the miracle of his survival, Ellen believed him. Sometimes the most profound acts of love come from places of deepest desperation. Ellen's journey reminds us that family isn't always defined by blood or legal documents, but by the sacred bonds we forge through sacrifice and resilience. When faced with impossible choices, she discovered that the greatest strength often emerges from our most vulnerable moments. What would you have done in Ellen's position? Would you have had the courage to stand in the rain that night, offering your child to a stranger for a chance at life? or the wisdom to recognize when pride must bow to necessity. In a world that often judges without understanding, Ellen's story teaches us that a mother's love transcends judgment, transcends identity, and sometimes transcends everything we thought we knew about ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please consider following our channel for more powerful stories of human resilience and family bonds that defy all odds. Like, share, and let us know in the comments what part of Ellen's journey resonated most with you. Sometimes the stories that break us open are the ones that ultimately make us whole.